Hi everybody, I'm Selena. I have Holly Castle, Dr. Holly Castle with me today. She's a naturopath and we are going to talk about sleep today. So why do I want to talk about sleep when I generally talk about relationships? I don't know about you, but when I don't get enough sleep, I am just totally crappy. And then if my husband's not in a good space, he doesn't react well either. But really, I can't show up fully with a heart open, centered in my relationship. So I wanted to ask Holly a few questions today to see what she could tell us about sleep, because I do think that having good sleep every day really is at the root of how we can alleviate a lot of relationship problems and life problems in general, but certainly that.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time.
I'm happy to be.
So what can you tell all the audience about what it is that what happens in our body when we don't get enough sleep?
Well, there's a couple of major things that happen, and there are also numerous smaller things, but the two most important things that happen when we don't get enough sleep is that the cells and tissues in our body do not get the opportunity to detoxify and repair themselves. And this is an essential part of maintaining good health. The other thing that happens when we don't get enough sleep is that our bodies do not have the opportunity to reset cortisol. And cortisol is that stress hormone, that fight or flight hormone that is pretty amplified during the day, especially in our stressful modern 21st century
with
existence.
Our phone beeping and our texts and all of these, the multimedia that continuously stresses us, the fast driving, all of that.
We have to be on all day long. And 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep allow our bodies to reset the natural cortisol rhythm that does exist in our bodies. Because cortisol is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, but too much of it is a bad thing. And when we're in that fight or flight mode and we don't reset it, then we carry that over into the next day and the next day and the next day. And what happens is we start to become reactive instead of responsive.
So we're depleted, really. Our body is depleted. And again, we can't show up fully in our relationship because we're so exhausted that who can have a good argument, a good outcome of an argument with a spouse, with a partner, when you're not your best self?
Yes.
Right. So how could people notice, what are some of the telltale signs for people to say, wow, I probably need to sleep more?
Well, a lot of us get a dip in the latter part of the afternoon, feeling like we need a nap. And there are cultures around the world that honor that with a nap. Instead of honoring that, we tend to reach for caffeine. When you start needing caffeine in the middle of the day as well as in the morning, then you should be able to say, you know what, I think I need more rest. That's my number one sign.
And so you're saying 7 to 8 hours of sleep seems to be about what we should get. Is there an ideal time when you should start sleeping? I know I've read that before midnight it's more important. What can you say about that?
Absolutely. The rest that you get before midnight is worth 2 hours of sleep after midnight. Now, why is that? Because in our cortisol's natural rhythm, it's starting to go down after sundown. It's actually ramping down to, in fact, allow us to sleep. But after midnight, it starts to reset again so that we can rise in the morning. So that time period before midnight is really critical, especially for the repairing the cells and tissues part. Because if they're all alert, they're not doing their job either, right?
Yeah, and so people who are natural night owls who just don't go to sleep before 12 or 1. Can they change their sleeping cycle, or is there something different they need to do?
I think being a night owl, quite honestly, is more of a habit than it is an actual physiological need on the part of the people who have this pattern.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it usually gets established early, and then it gets reinforced over and over and over again. And yes, they can change that, but it is difficult to do, but it is possible.
And so some of us, or many of us, watch TV before we go to bed. And we might have trouble falling asleep when we go to bed, or others have go to bed really easily, but then wake up in the middle of the night and have insomnia then. What are some tips you can give our audience to create a change in that?
Well, first of all, I really think the TV needs to be turned off at least an hour before you want to go to bed.
And why is that?
Because it's sending a signal to your body and your brain that you're preparing for rest. And that's a very strong and meaningful signal.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. If we stay up and we watch TV, especially something very stimulating, we are perpetuating this cortisol fight or flight response rather than allowing it to ramp down before sleeping.
And isn't there something in the blue light of the TV as well that
Yes, very
really
stimulating. It's suppressive to melatonin. And as are all those little LED lights you might have floating around your bedroom.
And your phone, that doesn't mean because you turned off your TV, you can now stay on your phone, right?
Exactly,
It's the
or
same thing.
your laptop.
Yeah.
All of those need to go about an hour before bed
Okay.
to get a really good, restful night of sleep.
Yeah, and that also reminds me of, I've seen lots of statistics that talk about couples who don't have a TV in their bedroom, A, get more sleep, 2, feel more connection, and actually also have a better sex life because they don't watch TV and get sidetracked. So, is there anything you can say about that?
Really, the bedroom needs to be reserved for 2 activities: sleeping and sex, or intimacy.
Yeah, connection,
Connection.
physical connection.
Exactly. Watching television in your bedroom, reading a book in bed, working on your laptop, all of those interfere with, again, that ramping down of the cortisol in your physiology and preparing for rest, but also preparing for intimacy.
So make sure that that's something, if intimacy is lacking in your relationship, look at your bedroom and decide whether maybe it's the TV that needs to go. Also, just quickly, we've addressed if you have trouble falling asleep, but what if you fall asleep easily but you wake up in the middle of the night? Is there something else you can do for that?
Yes, there are things you can do. Now, some people do better if they just get up for a little while. I actually don't usually recommend that unless you are in a pattern that's now being recognized as segmented sleep.
And that I found really fascinating when you mentioned that to
Yes.
me. So we're not necessarily saying anymore that we have to have a block of 7 to 8 hours,
Right.
but really over 24 hours you need to get 7 to 8 hours.
Exactly. Exactly.
So are there chunks we should have, or?
I would say you need at least a 3-hour chunk. And that's connected to the REM cycle, which I think most people are familiar with. That 3 hours allows you to cycle through the entire REM phase.
Yeah.
So there's actually, especially they're recognizing it now in older folks, they sleep 3 hours, they get up, they do a few things, then they go back to bed for 3 hours, and then they're up and about for the rest of the day, and then they may nap in the middle of the day for another 2 to 3 hours. And this is perfectly legitimate. And it makes a lot of sense when you look at our evolution as a culture and a society. We were nomadic. Many of us have nomadic roots. We weren't always living in cities. This is actually a fairly normal pattern.
To be up in the middle of the night and do something.
But for somebody who wants to go back to sleep, there are little tricks. Again, sleeping in a completely dark room is one way to just let your body know, I'm going to go back to sleep after I use the bathroom, or I wake up briefly after a dream, something like that. You could have a glass of warm milk if you're not allergic to dairy. That actually is very legitimate. Or even a little warm water with lemon.
Okay.
It's very soothing to the digestive system. And one of the other things we're doing at night is we're resting and digesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a couple of things you could think about doing. And the other thing is to not get too engaged in what the thoughts that are running through your head. Maybe a little meditation or prayer to get you back into the quiet space that you need to fall asleep.
Yes. And if you do need meditation help, you can get on my site, empoweredls.com, and free resources. And there I do have a meditation jumpstart technique that you can download.
Excellent.
So that'll help you with just some very easy breathing technique. Well, Holly, thank you so much.
You're
this was
welcome.
really enlightening.
Thank you for inviting
I hope
me.
our audience is learning something and able to make some changes with their sleep routine.
I hope so too. This is so important. And I see in my own practice that when people aren't getting enough rest, it is really harmful to their health.
Yeah, and I'm going to post below this video how you can get in touch with Dr. Holly if you would like. Thanks for watching. My name is Selena Ashu, and my company is Empowered Living Strategies.